In this video, I'm going to show you how to configure and use DLP policies in Copilot Studio. Know that this video will be the third video in a row that I will be going over certain concepts. There was the first video, which is how to actually get the CLI commands working for you, which is kind of the predecessor to the second video that I cut on this topic, which goes into being able how to turn on DLP enforcement for Copilot Studio and Power Platform and the Power Platform CLI. And know that this last one that I'm going to be going over today is going to be more tuned on actually with that all set up, how to go in and actually start configuring the DLP policies and what you can configure. So let's start with what is DLP to begin with, which is basically stands for data loss prevention. And what this is a data loss prevention policy that you can go in and configure. So if you're an administrator inside of Copilot Studio or inside of Power Platform and you want to control what users can and can't do with the configuration inside of Copilot Studio, this is where DLP policies really play into effect. You want to stop people from being able to use a specific connector, you can do it. If you want to say that this connector can't be used with this other connector to keep people from having information between business applications and non-business applications mingle, you can do it. If you want to make it where the only place that you can go to is certain websites with generative answers, you can do it. And I'm going to show you how to in this video. But let's start with the one at the top, skills for Copilot Studio. So if you want to disable the ability to turn on or have the ability to connect a skill to a Copilot Studio implementation or a Copilot, this is where you would do it. And the way you would do this is you would simply block this and it would take care of this. You'll notice this first column that says yes all over it. It's basically the column that says whether you can just block it or not. And then the second column where it says no means is there some additional configuration you need. And then that last column of built-in means that they're provided by Microsoft or a built-in policy to the system. So let's move on to the next one, which is chat without Microsoft Intra ID authentication in Copilot Studio. So what this means is that if you enable this, or better yet, you block it, it stops you from being able to have a Copilot that is unauthenticated. You would have to configure Entra ID authentication in Copilot Studio. In the case that we go to the next one, which is the Microsoft Teams channel in Copilot Studio, this is turning on and off the different channels. And you'll see all these different channels here where you can say, I don't want people to be able to use Teams as a channel. I don't want people to use Direct Line as a channel, Facebook as a channel, or Omni-channel, which is think of it as our contact center or CCaaS solution for customer service. So all of these are ones that are out of the box already today, and to enable them or to disable this capability for someone, you would simply be able to just say that you want to block these, but there is no configuration in any of these. Yes and yes at this very top one, which is being able to say that I have a knowledge source, which is SharePoint or OneDrive. Do I want to make that where people can do that or not? So I can turn on and off SharePoint and OneDrive, but then the configuration is there where I can also say that what I want to do is lock this down to only a certain set of SharePoint sites that I want to allow. So this way you can say not everything in SharePoint, but just maybe these specific URLs in SharePoint that I want you to be able to use. This is very effective for people who say they have certain document libraries and things of that nature that they want to control and be able to open up to users, but they don't want to open up everything. Then we get into public websites and data in Copilot Studio. So again, this one is where I'm going to be able to say, these are the websites that I will allow you to be able to use. And if they're not in this list, you're not going to be able to use them. So that's part of the configuration. Or I can just turn off public websites completely across the board. Now, you'll also notice there's one called Knowledge Source with Documents. And that one is going to be where the file upload capability. And notice it's not configurable. It's simply on or it's off. If you want it on, you can turn it on. And you can turn it off if you want to turn it off. And then we have application insights, again, an on and off thing. So If you don't want people to be able to configure application insights, then this is how you could control it. Okay, so one last thing just to make sure everybody knows where the documentation is, and then we'll get into the actual configuration of this. I wanted to make sure that you knew that on the Learn site, you'll see the Configure Data Loss Prevention for Copilot section. I'll put the URL in a box here in YouTube for you. And then what you'll see is that in this, it'll give you all the different prereqs. You'll see the list of the different ones. You'll notice that some of the ones that I said that are new aren't documented here quite yet. That'll be coming in the coming days, but know that what you have here is a lot of information on how you can configure DLP policies. If you want to configure the error message and all of that, you have the information here as well. But I just want to make sure that you guys know that this documentation is there and available for you to use. Now let's get into actually doing it ourselves. So to make this easy for you guys to see how to be able to do some of this, I've just got this sample Copilot that I've created that I'm calling DLP test. You'll see that what I've done here is I've actually configured it to use generative answers with Microsoft.com. And we're going to play with this so that you can kind of see how you can do different things. This will just be a test environment for me to be able to see the results of the DLP policies being set. So first of all, let's start with, how do I even find this? So the thing that you need to be able to do, and again, if you don't have DLP enforcement turned on, you need to go watch the video to be able to see how to turn it on for Copilot Studio. It's not on by default for enforcement. So with that, I'm going to click on the settings and I'm going to open the Power Platform Admin Center. Now, this is where we configure things as an administrator. And yes, you're going to need things like tenant admins or elevated privileges. The documentation goes over all of those different privileges that you'll need to be able to do this. In the case of this, I am an admin over everything. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go down, and you can see here where there's policies and then there's data policies. And you'll see here I don't actually have any policies today, so I need to create a new policy. And think of it as kind of like a group of different configurations of policies that we're going to do. So I'm just going to call this test policy, and we're going to click next. Now, the next thing you're going to see is there's a couple of things here that I want to make sure I explain. One is going to be these different groups, and you'll see business, non-business, and blocked. What this is that this allows you to be able to say, imagine that we're talking about just basic connectors. And when I talk about basic connectors, I'm talking about the ability for you to say, I want to be able to connect to SharePoint, or I want to be able to connect to ServiceNow or something like that. Those are all these different connectors, and you can actually search for them. You could see here, like if I said ServiceNow, for example, you'll see the ServiceNow connectors that are right here. And I could just very easily come in and say that what I want with these, you can see it's blockable. So I could come in here and say block, but what if I wanted to say, no, that's business data. And you'll notice that it's over here with business, and oh, by the way, SharePoint is business data. So these connectors could be used together now, but with the data from them. So, but if you had an application or a Copilot where you wanted to use a connector that was said to be non-business with business data, you wouldn't be able to do it. Now, if you had everything inside of business and you're only using connectors that are in business, you'll be able to use those together in the single application. In the case of non-business, you could use all the non-business together in that case. And for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these back to non-business just for now. But you can see how this will be the default, is everything will just show up in the non-business. Now, what if I don't want these to all be defaulted to non-business, which is the default? Notice that you can come in and choose up here where there was the set default group. You can choose to say, I want it to default to business. I want it to default to non-business. Or I even want to set it to default to block. Now, this is an interesting setting because a lot of people go in and set it to blocked. But the issue is going to be that you will also imagine we have a policy that if it is in blocked, it turns something off within the environment, such as SharePoint access for generative answers. If you have it set to default to block, and then there's a new policy that is released, and it turns off the ability to use SharePoint in generative answers, then what's going to happen is it's going to turn it off as soon as that policy gets created in that new location. So just be aware that this is something you want to think about and think about the impact of that. Now, there are going to be things that are going to be coming to make it easier, so you get some delays and things of that nature, and when something comes in so that you have time to react to it. But just be aware that this is what these different settings do. So I'm going to leave it at the default group being non-business, because our goal today is to configure some policies inside of for Copilot Studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type Copilot, and you don't have to finish out Copilot because you can see it already took out to Copilot Studio ones right here. They'll have the logo of Copilot Studio on them. And what will happen when we do this, let's just take this particular configuration right here, which is being able to enforce that you have to have authentication onto your conversational agent, that you can't publish one that is anonymous any longer. So I'm going to take that one and I'm going to move it to block. And by doing this, you can see now it shows up in blocked. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to type in Copilot again. And we're going to play with a different setting as well. And in that one, what I want to do is let's turn off the Facebook capabilities. So you can't use the Facebook channel any longer. And then I also want to say that we want to turn off public websites as well. So we're just going to play with the settings on block right now, and then we'll make some changes as we go. So now that we've done that, we should not be able to, in Copilot Studio, once this is applied to my environment, I'm not going to be able to create an unauthenticated Copilot any longer. I'm not going to be able to use the Facebook channel, and I'm not going to be able to use public websites any longer for generative answers. So that's what I've configured here. I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I want to do this. And when you look at this, you can also have like different connector patterns. Just know that we don't really want to play with this today. This is not really something that I want to kind of go over in this particular video, but know that if you want to learn more about connector patterns, you can go and learn more here. Now I'm going to continue on, and this is where I want to look at, well, how do I want to apply this policy? Do I want to apply it to all environments? Do I want to add it to specific environments? Do I want to exclude this from certain environments? So is it that I want everything except one? Is it that I want only select ones, or do I want it to go everywhere? And I'm going to just show you, if you said multiple environments, just know that what's going to happen here is it's going to ask you for which environment you want. And if I came back over here and I said add all environments, I would get, it's just going to do it, and we're going to create the policy. So in this case, we have that policy that's turning off those 3 different functionalities inside of Copilot Studio. And then on top of that, what we're doing is we're saying do it to every environment that we have. So we're going to go ahead and create this policy. And you can see here that I have created the policy at this point. So at this point, if I go back over into Copilot Studio, so let's just switch back to Copilot Studio, and we're going to need to do a refresh on the page. And now that my page is refreshed, you can actually see that I've now got this error at the top of the screen, and this is telling me that I've got an issue. So let's look at the issue that comes back. You'll see here that it actually is telling me that I have a couple of issues here that are keeping me from being able to actually go in and publish my Copilot going forward. And you can even expand this out and get more details about the different policy. You can download information here to get more information. But in general, what's going on is, remember, we had this turned on from Microsoft.com as the mechanism that we were trying to do. Now, if we go look at the actual settings and we look at security, you'll notice here that when I go to authentication, that this is actually turned off now. You can't even select authentication anymore because of the policy that we have applied, as well as if we go in and look at our channels, you'll see that while I can't do channels because of the way that the organization's done, you can the Facebook channel, but you can see here that it's warning me that there are DLP policies put in place, and this is because we blocked the Facebook Messenger one. So let's go and let's apply our policy slightly differently, because one of the things I want to showcase in this is I want to showcase the ability for us to go back in our test here. So let's make a change to the policy. Well, we'll go in and edit it, and we'll go in and say next, and then notice here where we had our blocked ones. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say let's keep these in place, but instead remember we had the ability to actually do something beyond block. So I'm going to move this back to non-business where everything else is, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to say Copilot. Let's find the one for public with public websites right here. And what I want to do now is let's configure this connector. And what I want to do is I want to say that let's add an endpoint. And what I want is I want Microsoft.com to be allowed. And so I'm going to say I want this allowed, and then I want everything else denied. And I'm going to save that. And let's go back through and let's just publish it again to all environments. We're updating our policy. So now let's switch back over and take a look at our Copilot. You'll see now that after I switch back, that I no longer have the red X on my knowledge any longer saying that I can't use Microsoft.com any longer, because I have actually met the policy. So now, just like before, I can now publish again, and my publishing is working. Now, again, this is just an intro to give you an idea of all the different things you can do with different DLP policies, and know that if there's a lot of interest in this, I'll build additional videos that'll go through each of these different ones and how to configure them for enforcement. But I want to say thank you guys for joining. Hopefully there's a lot of value you got in the video today. Please go and like and subscribe to my channel. And as always, you can download and try Copilot Studio at https:/aka.ms/try Copilot Studio.